Liquid modernity and mythopoeia, and the idea that up until about 200 years ago, each civilization in the whole world was based on a religion. And a religion also meant a mythos, a story, a governing story. And the ancient Greeks, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Confucianism, and then we had this radical experiment, and we had the modern project distrusting stories, distrusting the mythos, and trying to flee from mythos as a myth. Now, myth has taken on the meaning of a lie, of an insidious untruth. And obviously there are some that are untrue, but the only path to truth ultimately, it's not going to materialism, a material focus on reality is not going to get us there. It's the stories, it's the meaning, it's the mythopoeia. And so Nietzsche was wisely seeing that in the 19th century, in the 1800s, when he was living, he looked around Europe, he looked around the world, and he said, God is dead. And he had this story about the madman walking through the streets saying, God is dead, we've killed him. And what Nietzsche saw was that, yes, that society had questioned the mythos to the nth degree and killed it off. Not completely, but there's obviously still religious people around in Europe and North America, but that as a governing mythos, it was not there anymore in a real strong degree. And Nietzsche saw that this was going to lead to a crisis, and he predicted the 20th century where there would be like the bloodiest wars, the most extreme ideologies in the history of humanity, World War I, World War II, the Holocaust, the convulsions that rocked the 20th century. So this is not a blissful, nice period. This is a crisis that Nietzsche saw. And he didn't think, oh, we just got to go back to God, like he was an atheist. And I'm not even going to answer like the God question. That's not the topic of this. But we do have, like Nietzsche, to wrestle with the death of God crisis, the meaning crisis, liquid modernity. And we see this in, for example, modern series on Netflix like Black Mirror. I left my phone in my car, but the Black Mirror is your phone, and it's a mirror, and it's black. And technology, smartphones, computers, YouTube is extremely good, and it's saving lives, and it's connecting people, and it's creating wealth and jobs, and it's creating some negative unintended consequences when it's not used in a smart way, when people aren't regulating their use or their children's use, and you have a mental health crisis and a suicide crisis and all these other things which are happening, and the extreme polarization of society that's been happening. And so Zygmunt Bauman, who died a couple years ago, a Polish-British philosopher, sociologist, wrote a book called Liquid Modernity around the year 2000. And that's the word I want to build on, because it means all ages have had uncertainty. What liquid modernity says is uncertainty is permanent. So let's get into that. People in today's world, we have modernity, and Big Bauman was positing this term against the term post-modernity, and he had a couple of quibbles with the term postmodernity. First one was that it seemed to say that, modernity was over. And now we're past it. We're postmodernity. And what Bauman argued, and I agree with him, is we are more modern than ever. We're so modern. And something that's 10 years old is ancient history, and we've completely forgotten it. We're so much in the present that modernity is very much still with us. And the modern ideas, the French Revolution, liberty, equality, fraternity, I mean, they're not solid, now that's why they're liquid, but they're still among the dominant strains in society. Liberty for sure. Although, as we'll see, we also are longing for security, and because of this uncertainty, but I'm getting ahead of myself. And so we're compulsively and addictively modernizing everything. We want the newest. Like my iPhone's 2 years old and it's already old. The time flow is speeding up. Lyotard, who posited the term postmodernity, was right about this, that there's this speeding up of modernity. But I'm going to shun the word postmodernity because we're not post. The other reservation Bauman had is that it doesn't say what we are. It just says we're postmodern, but that just says what we're not. But what are we? And if you want to be serious about theorizing, you got to give us a bit more. And so liquid modernity, well, first of all, it says we're still modern. And then it gives us this liquid thing because we're not classically modern. Classic modernity, coming out of the Enlightenment and the Scientific Revolution and the Protestant Reformation, it rejected the previous solid culture, the structures, the institutions, the church or the mosque, temple, but it wanted solid new ones. It wanted, because it didn't see those other ones as solid enough, we need something more solid. So we needed liberty, we needed equality, we needed fraternity. These, they thought, were going to provide us this nice solid a set of ways of life. We can just have this new solid mold. The old mold, let's crash, let's destroy that old mold, those old structures, those old institutions. Let's give us a new mold. And so like the American Revolution, the French Revolution, other ideas, laissez-faire capitalism, Marxism to some extent. These are all different forms that it took. And we said, we're just going to make everything rational. This is the new criterion. And they thought, oh, rationality, that's obvious. All you need to do is do like scientific, mathematical, logical processes, and it's all perfectly obvious. Just follow that. Well, as we realized, it's not so perfectly obvious. The mythos didn't go away. The mysteries, the unconscious of humanity didn't go away. And reality, rationality is not so easy. It's always implicated in the emotional, in the bodily. We are bodily thinkers. We are embodied cognitive beings. We're not a brain in a vat. And so it didn't. It started to break down, and that's what Nietzsche pointed out. So, and in fact, so now here we are in the 21st century, and the slogan is flexibility. We got to keep adapting. Everything's new so fast. We have to be able to adapt so fast. So make sure you don't get too attached, too committed, too institutionalized. In fact, in the corporate world, like a perfectly functioning corporation, what do you do with it? Smash it, because you've got to be ahead of the next guy. If something works well, that's not enough. We need to constantly be changing, constantly be adapting, constantly restructuring, like firing people and hiring well, anyway, I'm in favor of most capitalism, but anyway, there's some forms of capitalism, and some elements of capitalism which are very destructive. And then this liquid modernity, this flexibility, this spinelessness gets down to the individual. Like, who am I? What's my identity? And in previous ages, let's say the Middle Ages, like, I'm Fortunato, the son of my father and my mother, and I'm of New Jersey. That's where I was born, and my father's from New Jersey, my mother's from the Philippines. These are different elements of my identity. I speak English, I speak some Spanish, some Italian. And so that was a fairly solid identity. And then even the profession, like if my dad was a farmer, I'd be a farmer. If my dad was a cobbler, if my dad was a prince, then I would be a prince, and so forth. But now we see that maximum flexibility is the goal. And it's like the politics of not just like the state, but the politics of life, of me. And so you can even have several identities on Facebook. And I'm in control of my life if I can become at will somebody else. And a new race, a new citizenship, and so forth. And so let's jump to my PowerPoint. And let's see if I can get this thing to work. And so here you can see let's go here. Liquid modernity and mythopoeia. And I have this image here of the ROM Crystal building in Toronto, Canada. And it's an interesting building, but the point that I want to show here is that it has shattered its link to the traditions of the past, and it's even like a sort of almost like a shattered glass image, which is very symbolic and appropriate in that sense. And you could say it has a certain beauty, but it's on purpose not connecting itself to a tradition, and it wants to shun and move away from structures of the past, values of the past, and just be totally new. Make it new. That was the modernist phrase in the 1920s and in Britain and New York and Paris. And so this is, in some ways, an icon of liquid modernity, that newness, and like it's so new that it's not even easy to understand what it is. It just kind of boggles the mind because it doesn't connect with something that we've experienced before. This is the danger of liquid modernity. And so yeah, here's some quick bullet points where we have the ZB, Zygmunt Bauman, lacking of solid identities and meanings. They keep changing. We create ourselves, and we choose the meanings that we're going to have, and we want maximum flexibility. And this has a certain positiveness, and we value these things. But as we'll see, this also creates obvious instability, and this is going to create the uncertainty and the fears and the anxiety, because we're in an anxious age. And then I cite here Charles Taylor, the Canadian philosopher, who noted in his book A Secular Age, pointing to our age as a secular age, that like now, like in 1500, it was virtually inconceivable to think that God did not exist and that God did not, support the being and the existence of this world, whereas today, that's very contestable, and even the contesting of it is even the dominant idea, especially in the elite world, and even believers are able to conceive of atheism. Like, it's totally conceivable. We had a rich symbolism in that enchanted world, and now it says now it's just psychology. This is the disenchanted world that Max Weber defined in the early part of the 20th century, and kind of following on Nietzsche. Weber takes that up and analyzes society and says it's a disenchanted society. The enchantment, the magic, the mysticism, the values, the stories, the symbolism is all kind of disenchanted and lost to some extent. And I'm going to just quickly talk about Alistair McIntyre here. In his book, After Virtue, he says, I can only answer the question, what am I to do, if I can answer the prior question of what story or stories do I find myself a part. And this story, this narrative, this meta-narrative, this is the mythos. This is what we need. This is how we find out who we are, and this is how we find out the meaning of our life. And you think about the ancient Jews, and when they do the Passover ritual every year, and they say, I am here, and Yahweh God, Adonai, is saving me right now. I'm part of that story, that salvation history, where God sends Moses to save the Israelites from slavery. That's me. That's who I am. And they embody that, and they ritually perform that meal, and that gives them a sense of who they are, and they're tied to that through text and through ritual and through a tradition that goes back 4,000 years, and that's a rich sense of who you are. But what if you don't have that? Do you make up a story? That's kind of what we're left with. But how do I make that up? It can lead to an incredibly anxious and anxiety-filled reality, which is kind of where we're at. And so in the After Virtue Society, that's building on McIntyre's word there. We can see here on the left, with virtue, these axial age traditions coming out of Confucianism and Buddhism in China, and the Rig Vedas in India, and the ancient Greek philosophers and Roman philosophers and lawyers, Judaism, Christianity. These traditions all participated in what McIntyre is calling a virtue society. We can call it an axial age. We can call it a set of mythos and mythopoeia that enriched and created those civilizations, which lasted thousands of years. And there, I understand my life by seeing it as part of a story, with a telos, with a mission, with a goal, with an end. It's directed. It's got a purpose. I must build on a wisdom tradition, Confucius, the Rig Veda, the Torah, the Quran, like this wisdom tradition of sacred texts that we read over and over again, and we build on it, and we have a tradition that goes thousands of years. I start from responsibility to others, a common good. So this is not starting from the individual, but starting from a community and a responsibility. And in a modern era, Jewish philosophers like Emmanuel Levinas, or Levinas, would say, where does philosophy begin? It begins from contemplating the face of the other. Like, that's where I can really start thinking, when I'm confronting another person's face, and that begins existence in a certain sense for me. It begins wisdom. Whereas in the After Virtue Society, we reject any story. We want to flee from those mythos, those mythoi, from those narratives. They're oppressive. They're limiting. We want to maximize our flexibility, we say. We want to repudiate the memory of the past. That's irrelevant. And it was horrible. It was biased and prejudiced, and those ancient Romans were so racist, and we can kind of just reject all of that out of hand. And we want to distance the self from any unchosen social responsibility. Maximum freedom. Freedom is the goal for everything. And so I'm going to pause here and take a look at a song, if I can, from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And the song is called, what's it called? Can't Stop. Okay, this is going to be a challenge. Let me get a drink here. Can't Stop. It has this kind of opening lick. Let me get a little bit better camera angle here. Okay. Okay. Can't stop, addicted to the shindig. Chopped up, he says, I'm gonna win big. Choose not the life of imitation. Distant cousin to the reservation. Defunct the pistol that you pay for. This pump the feeling that you stay for. In time I want to be your best friend. East side love is living on the west end. Knocked out, but boy, you better come to. Don't die, you know you'll do some do. Go write your message on the pavement. Burn so bright, I wonder what the wave meant. White heat is screaming in the jungle. Complete the music if you stumble. Go ask the dust for any answers. Come back strong with 50 belly dancers. The world I love, the tears I drop. To be part of the wave, can't stop. Ever wonder if it's all for you. The world I love, the trains I hop. To be part of the wave, can't stop. Come and tell me when it's time to. Sweetheart, it's bleeding in the snow cone. So smart, he's leading me to ozone. Music, the great communicator. Use 2 sticks to make it into nature. I'll get you into penetration. The gender of a generation. The birth of every other nation. Worth your weight, the gold of meditation. This chapter's going to be a close one. Smoke rings, I know you are the blow one. All on the spaceship persevering. Use my hands for everything but steering. Can't stop the spirits when they need you. Mob tops are happy when they feed you. Jay butterfly is on the treetop. Birds that blow the meaning of the bebop. The word I love, the tears I've dropped. To be part of the wave, can't stop. Ever wonder if it's all for you. The world I love, the trains I hop. To be part of the wave, can't stop. Under if it's time to. Can't stop, addicted to the shindig. Chopped up, he says, I'm gonna win big. Choose not the life of imitation. Distant cousin to the reservation. Defunct the pistol that you pay for. This pump the feeling that you stay for. In time I want to be your best friend. East side love is living in the west end. Knocked out, but boy, you better come to. Don't die, you know the truth is some do. Go write your message on the pavement. Burn so bright, I wonder what the wave meant. Kickstart the golden generator. Sweet talk, but don't intimidate her. Can't stop the gods from engineering. Feel no need for any interfering. Your image in the dictionary. This life is more than ordinary. Can't I get one, maybe I'm 2 or 3's coming up space to teach you with the Pleiades. Can't stop the spirits when they need you. This life is more than just a read through. And this life is more than just a read through is a great line where we're thinking about playing a role and reading a script and like, here's how I behave in this context, and here's how I behave with my parents and with my boss and with the governor and with the police and my minister, and I'm following those scripts, but this is more than just a read through. You don't want to just follow the scripts and think, oh, that's who I am. I'm just like doing what I'm supposed to do. No, this life is more than just a read through. And so this is, in a certain sense, a thought about liquid modernity where the onus really is on you and on me to build on our identities of the past, certainly from our parents, our language culture, our religious culture, our philosophical culture. That tells us who we are, but then we need to bring that forward, and we need to be who we are. We can't just lean on somebody else, and we can't watch from the sidelines and not live life. You have to get onto the field, pick up the ball, and start running, even if you're not sure, because that's the only way. You can't be a spectator. You've got to live. And so here's some other lines from the song, I think, that are appropriate. Choose not the life of imitation. So okay, we imitate, especially when you grow up, you sort of imitate your parents. But like, now you've got to choose, who am I going to be? And take that identity and like build it and have a sense like, here's my mission. I'm going to follow this, even if it kills me in a sense. Like, am I called to like help build democracy? Am I called to help my family, my people, my environment? Like, do it. Don't sit back and let other people shape your life. And distant cousin to the reservation, defunct the pistol that you pay for. And let's see. Oh yeah, this knocked out before you better come to. Don't die, you know the truth as some do. So you're kind of like in life, you get knocked out, bam, you're on your back. But you better come to, because no one's going to help you. You've got to choose. You've got to decide. And yeah. And so this life is more than ordinary. Can I get two, maybe even three of these, coming from space to teach you of the Pleiades? It's a great rhyme. I don't know why he's talking about the Pleiades, which is a star constellation. But this life is more than ordinary. This life is not just ordinary. I mean, it's just the material ordinary thing, but this life has an enchantment because it has value. Your life has value, and you better figure out what it is and move ahead with it and build that value. And each person, I'm convinced, has this potential in front of you of greatness, of at least goodness, of like building a farm or building a family or just building a culture or preserving a culture that's under attack. African American literature, why is that important? Like, we need that. We need to build that legacy and not lose it. It's for the future generations or multiple other literary cultures. Can't stop the spirits when they need you. This life is more than just a read through, and those spirits need you. This spirit of like where we're going, of who we are, of what society should be, because it's not what it should be. And so let's go back to my PowerPoint and see if we can say some more things here in line with good old Red Hot Chili Peppers, where we have the past axial age culture and the present liquid modernity. And this is borrowing the terminology of Charles Taylor, where in the past in these axial age cultures we had a porous self, where my self had kind of pores in it and I had holes, and where like immaterial consciousnesses could come into me. And whether that's angels or demons, that's the kind of religious thing, but also just ideas, like the idea of truth or of war or of lust, like that these spirits, these consciousnesses, these immaterial realities, these possibilities, these potentialities affected me. Not just, I'm not just a kind of billiard ball that's getting bounced around and I'm just a set of billiard balls, a bunch of material realities that are just being knocked around mechanically. This is like a mechanical version of reality. No, there was a, they called it spiritual. I don't like the word spiritual because that word's kind of been ruined by misuse, I would say. So let's call it consciousness. Let's call it immaterial, the material substrate of reality that's underlying this with the material reality, that includes the potentialities of things which are not there yet, so they're not actualized yet, but they're real. I mean, we know that they're real because if you say like, hey, you've got a potential and you're not living up to it, that you feel that because you're like, there's something real there, it's not there yet. But that's because it's a shame that it's not there yet. You've got to reach for that. That's a real thing. Good. So that's the ancient Greeks had, when they talked about the gods or the ancient Norse gods, like those were things like that. And then I have here the example of the beating of the bounds of the town. So in different parts of Europe, especially in other places in the Middle Ages, the priest would take the Eucharistic host and go on a procession with a bunch of people praying and singing with incense and songs around the physical layout of the town to drive away the demons and to bless that place and to call down God's goodness onto that place. And so they had a very keen sense of the link between the immaterial and the material worlds there, in a way that present liquid modernity has kind of lost, where we have a buffered self. So I've got a self that's buffered, like it doesn't have access. And an extreme version of this is the ideas of Descartes, the mind-body problem. Like, okay, there's material reality and there's immaterial reality, but how do they even interact? There's no mechanism that we can think of. Like, by definition, material reality doesn't get affected by immaterial reality, we think. And then consciousness is thought and goals matter purely material, unconnected to consciousness. That the purely material things are not connected to consciousness. We're not sure how that connects. And some people even deny that consciousness exists. They said like, well, that's just neurons. That's just, well, okay, if consciousness doesn't exist, who's conscious of that? Like, if it's an illusion, whose illusion is it? Anyway, consciousness is definitely there. That's what we're using all the time. Like, that's a reality that's undeniable, I would assert. And then, of course, they say that morals are me expressing myself. And there's a certain truth in that, as I was saying. Like, we've got to take ownership of our own life. We've got to live now. But it's harder today because we don't trust the stories of the past and we don't have stories that are reliable. And that's this death of God that Nietzsche was talking about. And so let's talk about sex. And because everyone's interested in sex. And so let me go back to my sharing of screen. And the idea, so this is taking just sex as an example of something that if we apply this in the liquid modern age, what does that mean? So in the ancien regime, that's the Charles Taylor term, I have sex, I strengthen my emotional bond to my spouse. I'm doing something real. It's connecting an immaterial and a material reality. That bond, which is immaterial, is real. It's not a fiction. It's not like a pernicious lie. Whereas in the extreme of liquid modernity, something like pornography, where there's not even another person there. So my sex is has no connection to anybody. And so, and then you have even less extreme versions that where like there's a cheaper, not cheapened version of sex, where as James Joyce called it, and pardon the graphic element here, it's a cork in a bottle. It's just two material things touching each other, going inside the other one. That's all it is. It doesn't have any meaning. It doesn't really have any immaterial reality. There's no bond there beyond like what I feel at that particular moment. It's not a real, where it's not really building a bond. It's not really building a relationship. And then going back to the Ancien regime, sex says, I commit my life to you. And this is that commitment thing that Bauman was talking about that we want to get away from, because the commitment ties us down. It lets us, it doesn't let us be flexible. We need to be maximally flexible in the liquid modern age. So now sex can mean many different things, or it can mean nothing. It can just, it doesn't have any necessary commitment element to it at all. The opposite of porn would be intimacy, connectedness. Like that bond, that connection can be one of the most powerful things in life. Or if I look at it from a liquid modernity perspective, it has no real reality. It's just, I'm just focusing on being maximally mobile. I just want to be mobile. So, and I'm looking at my time here. I'm going to keep going. And actually, I'm just going to end here because I'm out of time. But we'll go through this more next time. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.